Do you know about cultural elites and the institutionalization of ideas? Is there a culture of death in the elites? The concept of a culture of death refers to a societal trend or ethos that devalues human life, often characterized by an acceptance or promotion of practices like abortion, euthanasia, and other life-ending or life-diminishing actions. Examining this concept in the context of cultural elites and the institutionalization of ideas involves analyzing how influential groups or individuals shape societal values and norms regarding life and death. Cultural elites and the culture of death. Influence and ideation. Cultural elites, such as intellectuals, artists, politicians, and media figures, hold significant sway over public opinion and societal values. Their perspectives and the ideas they promote can profoundly impact how society views critical issues, including life and death. The institutionalization of ideas. Institutions like universities, media outlets, and policy-making bodies often reflect and propagate the values held by cultural elites. If a culture of death is present among these elites, it can become entrenched in societal institutions, influencing legislation, public discourse, and cultural norms. Manifestations of a culture of death among elites. Advocacy for abortion and euthanasia. Some cultural elites advocate for abortion rights and euthanasia, framing these practices as issues of personal autonomy and freedom. This perspective can lead to the normalization and institutional support of these practices, potentially devaluing the sanctity of life. Depiction in media and arts. Movies, television shows, literature, and other forms of media created by cultural elites often reflect and shape societal attitudes. Depictions of violence, glorification of self-destructive behavior, and narratives that trivialize life can contribute to a culture of death. Academic and intellectual trends. In academic circles, specific philosophical and ethical frameworks, such as utilitarianism or existential nihilism, may promote ideas that align with a culture of death. These ideas can influence future leaders and policymakers who pass through these educational institutions. Examples and impacts. Policy and legislation. Countries and states with progressive policies on abortion and euthanasia often reflect the influence of cultural elites who advocate for these issues. For instance, the legalization of euthanasia in some European countries can be traced back to the influence of intellectual and political elites who champion these causes. Social movements. Movements that promote ideas consistent with a culture of death often have backing from influential cultural figures. For example, the Right to Die movement has received support from prominent intellectuals and celebrities, helping to mainstream the concept. Counterarguments and perspectives. Respect for autonomy. Proponents of these practices argue that they represent respect for individual autonomy and the right to make personal choices about one's body and life. They challenge the notion that supporting such practices inherently devalues life. Ethical complexity. The debate around issues like abortion and euthanasia is complex, with valid arguments on both sides. Not all cultural elites who support these practices do so out of a disregard for life, but rather out of a belief in compassionate responses to suffering and respect for personal choice. Conclusion: the notion of a culture of death among cultural elites is contentious and multifaceted. While there is evidence that influential figures and institutions sometimes promote ideas that can be seen as devaluing life, these positions are often rooted in complex ethical and philosophical arguments. Understanding the dynamics at play requires a nuanced examination of these cultural elites' motivations, beliefs, and impacts, and the ideas they institutionalize.